In a region that seems always defined by negatives, it is extraordinary to have a story which, dare I say, is cautiously hopeful. Israel's overtures towards formal diplomatic relations with two of its oldest adversaries, Lebanon and Syria. This offer stands out as a rare positive note in a region habitually defined by conflict, mutual suspicion, and political stagnation. Let's begin with the facts. The Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, at a press conference in Jerusalem yesterday, declared Israel's interest in normalizing relations with Syria and Lebanon. He spoke candidly of expanding the circle of the so-called Abraham Accords, which had already brought the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco into formal ties with Israel, an historic shift that, given that before 2020 only Egypt and Jordan had signed peace treaties with Israel. Why now? Israeli leaders argue that after a brutal 12-day war with Iran, and with Tehran weakened regionally, this is an opportune moment to broaden diplomatic ties. And they believe that Syria and Lebanon, both reeling from war, economic collapse, and political disarray, might be more receptive than at any time in recent memory. And they may well be right. Yet, before we get carried away by the language of peace and normalization, it's vital to examine the details. Sa'ar was unambiguous. Israel will not negotiate the Golan Heights, a territory it captured from Syria in the 1967 war and annexed in 1981. And while the United States under Donald Trump recognized Israeli sovereignty there, the rest of the world, including Syria, considers it occupied land. A senior Syrian official has already responded that the Golan is an integral part of Syrian territory and that no deal is possible outside the framework of the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, which demands Israeli withdrawal from occupied territories in exchange for recognition. Lebanon, for its part, is politically fractured. Though a few politicians have broached the idea of breaking the taboo of normalization and even hinted that it might help recover occupied territory, Lebanon's new president and prime minister have been forced by popular pressure to reject direct talks. Memories remain fresh of the 1983 peace treaty that collapsed in the middle of furious opposition and civil war. Today, the powerful Hezbollah movement stands firmly against any rapprochement with Israel, despite its weakened position after recent conflicts. Some might scoff that this is pure Israeli propaganda, a distraction from Gaza's devastation and a ploy to isolate Iran further. There is merit to such skepticism. Israel has indeed continued its strikes in Syria, has moved troops into demilitarized zones, has bombed Hezbollah targets in Lebanon even after so-called ceasefires, but let's not dismiss the positive potential entirely. Even a partial thaw in these hostile relationships could transform the strategic landscape of the Levant. Lebanon and Syria have been locked in cycles of war with Israel for decades. Borders have been theatres of endless military escalations, proxy wars, and humanitarian disasters, and a shift to direct contact, even if it stops well short of full normalization, could reduce the chances of accidental war, enable coordinated border management, and open a path, however narrow, for de-escalation. It is instructive to recall the Abraham Accords themselves. Few would have predicted, even 5 years ago, that the UAE or Morocco would sign public agreements with Israel. Despite profound unpopularity among many citizens in those states, governments calculated that economic security and technological benefits outweighed the political cost. And similar calculations might eventually sway some factions in Lebanon or even a post-Assad Syria, especially if US economic incentives and sanctions relief are part of the package. Indeed, there are reports of direct contact between Israeli and Syrian officials, and the United States has been pressing both Damascus and Beirut to consider at least limited agreements, border talks, security committees, or confidence-building measures. Yet no serious discussion can ignore the elephant in the room, the Palestinians. For decades, the Arab world insisted on the principle of peace for land, or land for peace. Meaning Israel must withdraw from occupied territories and allow a Palestinian state to be established before wider normalization. Gideon Sa'ar dismissed this approach as non-constructive and even argued that a Palestinian state would threaten Israel's security. This blunt rejection makes the entire process politically toxic for many Arab governments and morally questionable to many observers. Can genuine regional peace be built while the Palestinian question remains unresolved? And there's a danger that partial normalization with Syria and Lebanon might legitimize permanent Israeli control over the Golan Heights, entrench occupation elsewhere, and divide Arab negotiating positions further. Still, despite these formidable obstacles, we should acknowledge that any talk of peace in this region, so often locked into cycles of bloodshed and revenge, is preferable to silence or threats. It signals a grudging recognition by Israel, Syria, Lebanon, and the US alike that the status quo is unsustainable. It offers at least the possibility of negotiation instead of war, of mutual interest instead of eternal enmity. So it must hold all parties to high standards. Peace that ignores justice or entrenches occupation is not true peace. Yet even limited diplomatic engagement can save lives, reduce suffering, and open doors to harder conversations. In a region too often defined by negatives, the simple act of talking about peace is itself a small positive, one that, if nurtured wisely and ethically, might grow into something greater.